What's up, everybody? Tim Anderson here, aka Renvale, and today we're diving into Secret World Legends, which is a rarity in the sense that it's an MMORPG that I've actually never played. I know that sounds crazy because I've played just about every MMORPG under the moon, but this one snuck under my radar, likely because of the fact that I've never really enjoyed too many of the Funcom titles, because I don't really like PvP and I don't really like the survival components of the Conan games, despite the fact that I love the Conan intellectual property and the books and the films and everything else. So I just kind of skipped this one over, and I remember when it came out, it was touted as having some really cool supernatural storylines, and it just kind of faded over the years, and I think it eventually got revamped into what it is now, which is Secret World Legends, because when I went digging this morning and I was looking this up, like, it actually links back to, like, if you go digging, you'll find the old website, which is no longer active for secretworld.com, and now everything links to some other thing for this Secret World Legends. So whatever the revamp is, that's what we're diving into today for this first impressions video. Now, if you're someone like me who has never played this game, maybe you'll find this information useful, or if you're someone who hasn't played it in a long time and you're coming back to it in 2023 and you're looking for more information about what the game looks like these days, what state it's in, that's what this video is all about. It's not a review per se, it's just my first impressions based on running around for a few hours, playing a couple of different characters through the introduction quest, and then just kind of getting to the point where they drop you into the world. And so far from what I've seen is it's a fairly standard story-based MMORPG in the sense that you start off, you get a character creation process that's very standard. I've seen this a million times in a million other MMORPGs. There's nothing to write home about here. Eventually you get to the class section, and this is the one area where I just don't know enough about this game to know whether or not any of these classes even matter, or if they're all just sort of homogenized, because it does sort of show you as you're going through and creating characters. It has like a difficulty meter at the bottom of each one of these, where it kind of shows you how many skulls or whatever it is, like, to represent, like, this one's really easy to play and this one's really hard to play. But I've found that over the years those are usually just related to how squishy is the character, because if it's really squishy, then you need to learn how to get out of the way, and that makes quote-unquote difficult gameplay. So Again, I don't know enough about the classes yet to be able to make any judgment calls on these, but they have, a standard array of, like, melee, DPS, and heal classes here. So I just picked a couple. I tried the Gunslinger the first time, and then the second time I tried the Magus, and went through, and you get the same exact storyline essentially, no matter what you pick and no matter which faction you pick. It's just the tutorial. So once you've done the tutorial, you get dumped out into the real world. But this is where I kind of got a little bit of a disconnect happening, because I am a stickler for good story. That's the number one thing for me, is good story. And story is what's going to keep me involved in a game. And so far the story has been intriguing. But there's one thing that normally I don't complain about too much, because I can usually get past it. There have been a couple of instances where I haven't been able to get past it. One instance is Dungeons & Dragons Online. I find the combat to be so horrific, the way the characters are controlled and everything, that I just can't play Dungeons & Dragons Online. No matter the fact that I love Dungeons & Dragons and I love Lord of the Rings Online. Lord of the Rings Online is my favorite MMORPG of all time. Turbine did something very different with the controls of Lord of the Rings Online. And when it comes to Secret World Legends, this game has immediately lost me when it comes to the combat controls, because they have your main attack button tied to the left mouse click. Not only that, but it's one click per use. So if you want to, for example, shoot your guns at a mob, you have to sit there and click as fast as you can and spam that left click to be able to do damage to the mob. That immediately took me out, and I was like, this needs to be I need to be able to push that mouse button and continually fire my weapon or my abilities or whatever the case may be, because this single click shit is for the birds. And that right there was almost enough to make me log out of the game. It was enough to make me say, you know what, I started as a gunslinger. The moment I found out that I had to actually click, 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 click to fire my gun, I stopped that character. I turned around and made the Magus. And I said, well, let's try a different character and see what this one's like. And honestly, it's not that much different because your main ability is still a single fire, single use thing. And you have to click it over and over and over and over to use it. And that is just really poor combat design in my mind. And when you're playing a game where you're expected to be like a DPS class and do lots of DPS. Other than that, you've got your standard array of abilities in the hotbar below. You've got, half a dozen abilities that you can choose from. Slot them down there, and go from there, and everything's on cooldowns, and it looks like you've got some unique functionality per class, kind of depending on what you're playing. Like the gunslinger had the gun roulette, which is like if the chambers match up in your guns, you'll do some extra damage. And then the Magus had this thing with the thaumaturgy, I think is what it's called, where you can, you start doing damage and you start building up heat, and then you have to bleed the heat off and switch to cold. And I've kind of seen this before in games like, I think it was my Black Mage in Final Fantasy XIV, but also like the Rune Keeper in Lord of the Rings Online. These classes where you can build up a certain amount of energy until you get too high, and then you have to bring it back down or switch over to something else. So that's something I've seen in other games before, and I haven't tested enough of these other classes to know if this is something that holds true throughout all of the different classes, or if it just happens to be something that's unique to the Magus. And then like the gun roulette thing with the gunslinger, I don't know if those are things that, I don't know if all of the classes have the abilities. So here's a few things that I don't know yet, because I haven't seen anything yet in my initial few hours of the game. I haven't seen any group-based gameplay. I don't know if there's dungeons in this game. I don't know if that's something we're going to be getting into at some point. I'm assuming, because back in the day it used to be an MMORPG, so I'm assuming there are some group-based components to this game. But I also know that if you read the website and everything, it's kind of designed these days, or been redesigned to be extremely focused on the story and having that be the primary focus. So if it plays something like, say, Star Wars The Old Republic, where you're just doing storyline all the time by yourself, I'm okay with that as long as the story is good and can keep me going and get me past the initial combat stuff that I really don't like. Now, ultimately, by the time I got done running the second character through the introduction quest and I got dumped out into the city, I found this part to be really cool because it was kind of like a Stranger Things type, creature coming up out of the city streets, and we fight it, but then I get knocked unconscious, and then I'm having an encounter with some weird stranger, and then I'm getting, told to go to this location, and then I'm dropped off in a city, and now I've got a new quest line, and I've got to run through and meet some new people. So, I mean, the storyline is enough to keep me intrigued, but my initial gut reaction, my initial first impressions, is that I'm not impressed. The combat, the way the combat controls without mouse click is enough to make me not want to play this ever again. However, I've heard good things about the story, so I am going to try to push through and see if I can't get at least 10, 15, maybe 20 hours into the game to see if I can't actually get enough out of it to do a proper review. But it's struggle bus for me because of the way this controls. Beyond that, the game doesn't look too bad for its age. I'm running in ultra settings on my PC, which is an older laptop at this point, and it still ran pretty good. It installed quickly via Steam. I like the fact that since it's on Steam, I can set up a controller if I want to and run around that way. So we'll see what remains of this after I dive into it a little bit more. But I would love to hear your thoughts on it. If you've played this in the past, or if you've played the revamp, and you have additional thoughts you can add to this, drop those down in the comments below. And for those of you who enjoy this type of stuff, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, and support the channel if you can, please. I only get to do this because of the support of the community. So memberships here on YouTube start at $2.99 a month. There's also the Patreon page. You can do super thanks and super chats and live streams. You can do all those things. So check it all out. Check out the Discord. Let me know your thoughts. Stick around. See you in the next video, everybody. Until then, stay safe. Happy gaming.